Hi, my name is Logan, and I wanted to talk to you about the field of educational statistics and measurement, also known as psychometrics. You might see it referred to in other ways in other universities, research methodology, or you might just have the measurement and statistics switched around. Not the most popular field in education or psychology, certainly, but there's definitely a lot of need in the workforce for people with the set of skills that you develop going through a graduate program in educational statistics and measurement. So what we do in psychometrics, in the statistics side of things, is usually involving quantitative research studies. So you should have some background in either statistical analyses or research methodology or both, and we do a lot of designing research studies, helping people who are applied researchers designing their study and determining how you're going to go about collecting variables and things like that. As well as once the data collection is complete, we're involved in the quantitative analysis of that data. And we do this by applying statistical models to educational and psychological data. The models can vary a lot. Sometimes you'll do something really simple, like an ANOVA, and sometimes you can get into more complex things with when you have nested data, or if you have a structural equation model or something like that. The measurement side of educational statistics and measurement is more focused on measuring latent traits. Latent traits are difficult to measure because you can't just hold a ruler up to them, and you have to make sure that the questions that you're asking, whether it's a personality test or an intelligence test, you have to make sure that the questions are measuring what you're intending to measure, and that's why validity and reliability are so important in the field of psychometrics, because we need to know that we're not measuring something that our instrument is claiming to not measure. You know, you don't want to measure race if you're trying to measure intelligence. And the way that we do research a lot of times in this program is through simulation studies, where we use computer programs such as R or SAS to generate a bunch of data for us, and we tell the computer program how we want that data to look, and that way when we test our statistical model, we know what the results should say, and we're basically trying to see if our model can detect those results. So we do research in things like I said, item bias, seeing if test items are measuring something like race or gender rather than what the item is actually trying to measure. If you get into this field, there's a bunch of different ways that you can go in terms of your future career. You can work for state or federal organizations, stuff like state education departments, a lot of larger school districts. Like here in Milwaukee, we have people that we hire to do research, and a lot of school districts that are in larger areas will hire specifically psychometricians to help with whether it's the design of certain tests or just doing research in general to see if students are improving, things like that. In industry, you can get into testing companies and things of that nature. That's more applied as well. Well, the state and federal organizations are pretty applied too. So if you're going to be working in one of those two areas, you're probably going to be doing more research that focuses on real data and on students or individuals, and you're trying to measure educational variables. A lot of times in testing companies, they'll do things like equating to make sure that the group who took the test one year is scored similarly to the group who took the test another year, so that you can compare scores across years without having to worry about there being a difference between the interpretation of those scores. In academia and universities, obviously you can become a professor and you can teach if you get your PhD in this area. And if you're doing research as a a professor, a lot of times you're going to be doing more theoretical stuff like simulation studies and looking to publish in scientific journals rather than writing reports for a school district or something like that. You can also get into institutional research where you're looking at how the university is sort of determining who gets in, or looking at incoming test scores, things like that. In terms of applying to these programs, the grad school application process itself for any program can be a little bit intimidating. If you're going into educational statistics and measurement or a related field, I would highly recommend some sort of major involving psychology or education. Math and statistics helps as well, and especially if you're in psychology, you'll want to take a research methods course and a statistics course for sure. And once again, computer programming, since it is a big part, especially with simulation studies, that type of experience would help. I know we have one person in our program right now who came in with a computer programming background. You don't necessarily have to major or minor in computer programming, but if you take a class or two on Java or Fortran or one of the more basic languages, that stuff all translates well when you start learning SAS or R or even the syntax in SPSS or something like that. It definitely helps to have research experience when you're applying to graduate school. This also ties in a lot, I found, with letters of recommendation. If you have a professor that you've worked with on research, you're no longer a face in the crowd to that professor. You're not just someone that they had in class. They can speak to your abilities as a researcher and what it's like to work with you in that type of setting. So it helps to get familiar not only with data analysis and with the design of an experiment, but also in terms of getting those letters of recommendation, because it can be tough to get 3 letters of recommendation, especially when you go to a university and you don't, there's 30 people in your class or whatever, and you have to be able to stand out among those people. So the GRE is something that you'll probably have to take if you're going to one of these programs in educational statistics and measurement. Not all of them will post the exact cutoff that they need for your GRE scores in order to get in. And I know when I was applying, it was in that weird time where they had just changed the scale of the score, so I had to convert what my score was and see if my score was good enough based on their requirements. I would definitely recommend using practice materials to prepare for the GRE, because it is kind of different from what you've been learning in college. Some of the math stuff even goes back to stuff that I had not covered since high school when I took the GRE. And a lot of your university, if you're at a university, the libraries will probably carry study guides or practice guides for the GRE, which is definitely something I recommend. I would take some of those practice tests and read through what the exam would be like. In terms of graduate school, what you actually do when you get there, this breaks down into several different areas. Obviously, you have your coursework, and within coursework in this program, there's several different areas. You can take statistics courses. Obviously, you'll take a lot of those, and you'll learn about analysis of variance, regression, hierarchical linear modeling, structural equation modeling, things like that. Hopefully a class in categorical data analysis. Your measurement courses will be pretty distinct from the statistics courses, in that you'll be learning more about the theory behind measuring latent variables or measuring intelligence and things like that. You'll have the more traditional model, the classical test theory model, as well as the more modern model, item response theory, which is sort of the dominant model in particularly in large-scale testing and in standardized testing these days. You'll also probably learn a little bit about generalizability theory. In addition to the statistics and measurements classes, you usually have to take classes from areas outside of your specialty area. And since educational statistics and measurement is housed in the educational psychology department, you have to take psychology classes on things like human development, cognition, and at UW-Milwaukee, since we're in an urban area, we're required to take an urban education class as well. Another part of your graduate school life will be assistantships. You'll pretty much usually choose between a research, maybe not choose, but you might get forced into doing either a research assistantship or a teaching assistantship. As a teaching assistant, you'll obviously be helping with answering student questions and grading homeworks, usually in the entry level, the very first statistics courses, and sometimes teaching the labs in those courses as well. And I've had people that I know in my program that have also had the opportunity to teach a class themselves rather than just being the teaching assistant. So you might be able to do that as well. It depends on what your interests are and what university and what program you're at and everything. In terms of research assistantships, that varies as well. I've had friends that have their research assistantship pretty much involves working directly with a professor and helping with their research. At UW-Milwaukee, we have a consulting office where we actually work with Milwaukee Public Schools and a lot of different outside people that come in, and we're basically a consulting office where we help them design their research studies and we help analyze their data. So there's a lot of data analysis and writing reports, and even things like using Qualtrics to put surveys online for people. In addition to coursework and assistantships, you'll also be doing a lot of research. It definitely helps to get involved with research as early on in your graduate school career as possible. Just talk to your professors or your fellow students and see if they would be interested, see if they have any ideas that you might be able to help them with. And it definitely helps to be able to present at conferences such as NCME, AERA. That gives you great experience, not only because you get a lot of good feedback for when you're trying to publish, but also because it's just great to go out and meet other people in the field. Even presenting at something like a brown bag or a research gala on campus can be really helpful. After you finish your coursework, you'll usually have to do some sort of prelim exam. This varies between universities and even within universities between departments. And after that, you'll have to complete a dissertation, which is an original study that is a lot of work. I haven't started on mine yet, but it has to be something that's original, and it has to make a good contribution to the field and things like that. So it's a big undertaking to go into the dissertation. And these programs usually have the option of doing an internship as well. I'm not sure if some programs require internships, but I know at UW-Milwaukee ours is optional. It can be a great experience. There's a lot of internships available in the educational statistics and measurement field. Testing companies like ACT, ETS, Pearson, a lot of those companies do internships, and it can be good to get that experience on your resume, as well as like I said, meeting people in the field and getting experience in the field. Like I've said throughout this whole thing, there's several related fields. I don't know if they're even so much related fields as if they're just different names for the same field. You'll usually find these programs housed in either the psychology department or the education department, or like at UWM, the educational psychology department. You'll have educational statistics and measurement, but some people switch the measurement and the statistics around. You'll have psychometrics, and within psychology you have quantitative psychology. There's also research methodology courses or programs at certain universities. So I hope this whole thing has been helpful and you've learned a lot about the field of educational statistics and measurement, and I wish you the best of luck in applying to graduate programs.